Hello, welcome back to Fallout 76. One of the things that should be bleedingly obvious if you've set foot in the New Ohio region is that it's absolutely, positively, indubitably intended to appeal to people who watch the TV series. Come on, we literally have one of the main characters from the series as an NPC. So yeah, this is literally intended to appeal to new players who might have tried out the game after seeing the TV series. When the first TV season came out, we didn't see attempts at a crossover like that, which I think indicates that Bethesda was genuinely surprised by just how successful the TV series ended up being. And if you look at the stats, there was a pretty big spike in the player counts, on Steam at least, but I wouldn't be surprised if the same happened on consoles. We're looking at a jump from an average of 15,000 to 72,000. That's easily the biggest jump in the last 5 years, so it wasn't a small increase by any means. But as you can see, it only lasted a few months. We went back to the normal numbers in August, and that's been the case until now. Which tells us that the game failed to retain the new players. It's pretty damn obvious that Bethesda expects a similar spike with the release of the second season, and they're going all out to try and keep as many of them as possible. So the big question is whether they'll succeed in permanently increasing the player count. In other words, can they convince these new players to stick around? One of the big features of the new season is the new region, called Burning Springs. It's to the left of the map, and you just have to step into it to see that it's obviously a love call to New Vegas. The terrain is classic desert-like, with sandstorms whipping across the landscape and wild animals to match that landscape. I've never been to Ohio myself in real life, but I'm pretty sure from looking at the map that Ohio is not a desert. So it might not exactly be lore-friendly, but what you do get is a unique and new environment compared to places like the forest and the mire. So from that perspective, it is adding something different to the game. There is an explanation in the lore about how your classic corporate malfeasance is responsible for turning Ohio into a desert, but to be honest, it's pretty obvious that this is retrofitting. The landscape was chosen first, and then the lore was crafted to match that. The goal was obviously to appeal to people who watched the TV series, or maybe played New Vegas by giving them something familiar. This is even more apparent as you explore. There's a bunch of locations that are obviously Easter eggs, like the outdoor cinema. It's literally that settlement location from Fallout 4. Or this dinosaur park. I'd say that it's inspired by the dinosaur at Novak in New Vegas. Or the Super Duper Mart. This scene inside is literally from the TV series. The new free fast travel location takes inspiration from many places in Fallout 3 and 4, like Arafu. And yes, I haven't forgotten about the ghoul, again literally from the TV series. And the devs have made absolutely sure that you'll run across him. He's there just outside Vault 76, so you'll see him as soon as you start the game. Unfortunately, you don't get to show him who's the true boss of the Wasteland. But that's the case with all named NPCs, so it's not particularly surprising. And he's outside multiple rail stations. And outside multiple faction bases. Make sure to give him a taste of the good stuff while you're there. Yes, this is my favorite emote in the game. It's just so ridiculous it's funny. That was all captured in the same playing session too. It's just everywhere. He gets around more than we do, and we use fast travel. But it's not just about locations on the map. Fallout 76 has always had a lot of unmarked locations scattered across the map, as well as small little Easter eggs. And that's also the case with the new update. There's lots of little buildings and places to explore scattered throughout the place. And combine that with the new collectibles quest, and you can see that the developers wanted to encourage players to explore the nooks and crannies of the new zone. I've always been a fan of the role that maps play in the immersion of Fallout games, and encouraging more exploration and less fast travel is a good thing. Although to be honest, around 150 collectibles may be a bit too much. Something like 50 would have been a better thing, so people can find them all without needing to look up guides. But regardless, making more use of the map is a positive thing when it comes to enhancing the player's immersion. at least in my opinion. But I don't think there's too many Fallout fans who disagree with the notion that the map is an important part of the game. Then add small visual improvements, like the new northern lights stretching across the night skies. It's well worth spending a few minutes just looking around and taking in the new scenery. One thing that is clear is that the developers have gone out of the way to offer something for both veteran and newer players. For the veterans, the new zone offers a new and different environment distinct from what's available in the rest of the map. While for fresh players, there's a plethora of Easter eggs from the TV series and all the Fallouts. So from a visual perspective, there's a lot of new things to look at. But the problem with visual eye candy is that it can only hold your attention for so long before it becomes trite. Yes, even the auroras stop having the impact they had the first time you see them. They're very well done, but no game can rely on just visuals to retain players. So based on just the visual improvements, all we might expect is that new and returning players would stick around for a while, and then move on to other games once they become bored. And that's exactly the pattern that we saw in the player counts after the first season. Eye candy and Easter eggs are just not enough without engaging gameplay to be the main course of the feast. So that begs the question, is the gameplay good enough to keep the interest of new players? Speaking for myself, one of the things that surprised me the most when I started playing Fallout 76 was that it didn't have the appearance of a multiplayer game. I'm not someone who plays a lot of multiplayer games, but one of the common factors is that you tend to start in some kind of lobby. It could take the form of a space station or a medieval town, but the point is that this is a safe place where people can congregate in before starting a mission or a quest. This is usually where you interact with guilds, chat with other players, or check out messages. Just basically spend time doing whatever. There's usually a lot of players around, and you'd have to be blind like a mole rat to miss that you're playing a multiplayer game. But Fallout 76 is very different. When I first started, I fully expected the vault to be one of those lobby areas. It would be a perfect place for a lobby. You get ready inside and then leave to play around in the wilderness. But after making my first character and leaving my room, I was surprised because instead of seeing a room full of players, I just got told to get the F out. Although to be fair, it wasn't exactly in those terms.
Best get cracking!
I think I did get a 10mm pistol, but aside from his stupid sexy vault suit, you're basically naked.
Feels like I'm wearing nothing at all.
Quit it!
You step out of the vault, and it's just like all the other 3D Fallouts. There's a vault door behind you, and ahead of you a landscape extending as far as the eye can see. Or at least that was the case before this guy started to hang around like a bad smell. The devs have added a few things over time since the game launched, like this donation box for some free goodies, and these two characters giving you a starter quest. But Fallout 76 is just like any single player Fallout game. You can entirely ignore the questlines and just explore. The regions used to be level scaled, so you'd have to spend some time leveling up before you could take on enemies in harder regions, but physically you could go anywhere. And now with all enemies scaling to your level, you can do most activities right out of the vault. To be honest, I'm not sure which approach is the better one. I think that they both have their advantages. But the point is that you get the same go out and explore feel as the single player games. The quests themselves aren't amazing, but I think it would be literally unfair to expect complex, multi-branching questlines in a multiplayer game. At the end of the day, you're sharing the world with other players, who may or may not have done the quests, and who may or may not have made the same decisions as you did. But if you play the game for a bit, you can see that the developers went out of their way to try and hide that as much as humanly possible. I'm not sure how many other people appreciate the instance system, but to me, it's a touch of genius. Having separate instances for each player means that your questlines can have branching decisions, but your decisions do not affect other players because those other players have their own instances. So for example, at the end of the Brotherhood of Steel questline, there's a major decision. It literally affects who is and isn't present inside the base. But because of the instance system, different players will see the right NPCs for what they chose. But that's not all. Dungeon type areas are also pretty much all instanced. What this means is that they're literally single player spaces. You explore them alone, or with your team if you choose to play as a group. I can't emphasize enough just how important this is in maintaining a single player feel to the world. One of the things that really put me off when I tried Elder Scrolls Online is that when you explore dungeons, enemies that you killed would literally respawn after you took a few steps past them, and other players would be running around in the same dungeon. It just didn't feel like an Elder Scrolls game, at least not in the way you would be accustomed to if you were a fan of the single player Elder Scrolls games. In Fallout 76 you only run across other players in the open world, or in particular activities like raids. But the number of players in each server is also capped, which means that unless you go out of your way to find other players, you're generally not going to run into them while playing. Usually you'll only see multiple players in the locations where you have workbenches and storage boxes, like Nukator or the White Spring Mall. These have become de facto places where players congregate, but they're purely optional. You can choose to avoid them altogether. Fallout 76 may be a multiplayer game, but the developers clearly intended it to feel as single player as possible. And I have to say that this was one of the biggest surprises, and a very pleasant one. You'll be done with the quest lines by about level 50 or 60, so as a single player experience, it's actually quite comparable to the length of the single player games. And after that, you can just continue to explore the various locations across the map, because a lot of them tend to have their own little mini stories. Or just focus on building your camp to be as pretty as possible. You can tell that I haven't exactly tried too hard with this character. I just want lots of water. Can you really blame me? Or just do whatever you want. But I will say that one of the biggest drawbacks of just exploring the world in Fallout 76 is that you can't make a noticeable difference to the world. Your camp, such as it is purely cosmetic. You build it for your own pleasure. Maybe every so often someone comes by and admires it, but you can't affect the world around you. For example, your camp can't be the start of a new settlement like it can in Fallout 4. And even what we had in Fallout 4 was pretty shallow. Personally, I keep hoping that the camps will become useful in some way, other than giving you resources and being nice to look at. Same with the quests, although that's more understandable since it's a multiplayer game. As we talked about before, the game is already amazing at simulating a single player experience. But it's ultimately still a multiplayer game, so by definition, you can't get anywhere near the type of consequences that you can get with a single player game. So from the perspective of a new player, the game can be played as a single player game because the game went out of its way to cater for that type of player. But at some point you'll run out of things you can do by yourself. And looking at the player counts, I think that this is why we see the pattern that we do. New players went through all their single player activities and then chose to step away from the game. But for those who don't, there's still activities like events, expeditions and daily ops. Events are multiplayer activities that happen every 20 minutes. They're usually activities where the players come together for some PvE fun against hordes of enemies. And because you had a good mix of high and low level players, you always participate in some way, no matter how weak you might be. The high level players would do the heavy lifting of killing the strong enemies, while low level players could focus on tagging enemies to get more experience, or on completing the event goals. Everybody could take part in the fun, even if you were a level 2 straight out of the vault. I'm personally more of a single player type, so in the beginning I actively avoided events and other multiplayer activities. But when I tried them, I found them to be surprisingly fun. I was weak and I didn't know what the hell I was doing, but I tried to contribute where I could while trying to learn how the events worked. It was also surprisingly fun to see other players, especially because the community is so nice on the whole. It's just weirdly fun to emote at each other. It may seem stupid to anybody who hasn't played a multiplayer game, but it's surprisingly fun in practice. And you can see that I'm not the only one who thinks this way. Seeing a bunch of people emoting to each other is just nice. I don't think it would have been as nice if you saw players everywhere all the time, but just seeing them every so often at events was actually a refreshing change from your solo gameplay. So the next step after doing the questlines is to join the communal events. And a hidden benefit is that they were designed in a way that allows new players to learn the ropes safely, because veteran players will take the responsibility of finishing the event. There was a natural progression for newer players. But I have to point out that things have changed since then. It's now rarer to see a lot of players at the less popular events. I can't tell you exactly why. Only the devs would have the data to tell for sure. But in the last few seasons, participation in events has drastically dropped. Eviction Notice is still the single biggest source of legendaries, so it's pretty much always full. But a lot of events that would usually have a fair few participants are getting a lot less players than before. Moonshine Jamboree is a good example. Back in the day, it was almost guaranteed to be full when it happened, but now it's not unusual to see 0 players, or maybe 1 or 2 even though the timer is already at multiple minutes. The footage is from an unusual case, because there's a lot of new players at this event. This was during the week of Christmas, and I'm guessing that we were getting a lot more people with time off. But even then you can see that it's basically empty. I've often seen cases where I'm the one who starts the event, and only then do people turn up. This tells me that other people have also noticed that events are now underpopulated. And because events are often difficult to carry by yourself, it seems that players hold off on joining until they see at least someone else there. Look at this low level guy trying to carry this event by themselves. This was never the most popular event, but it's pretty sad to see a single low level struggling away. To their credit, they were doing pretty decently, and luckily after I joined, several other medium level players joined too, so the event finished well. But can you imagine a level 37 trying to kill the end boss by themselves? This is not the way events are supposed to run. I spent the first few days of the holiday season focusing on this, and I can tell you that seeing a single low level player trying to struggle through an event by themselves was common. You see events that have been open for multiple minutes, yet the player count is 1. And when you zoom in, you see a low level player. Whenever I see this, I've been joining these events, even the ones I don't particularly like. I do get the season score from doing events, but other than helping the low level players, I'm not getting much out of these. The reason is that a low level shouldn't have to learn events by struggling through them alone. Especially because events were specifically designed to be done by multiple players. Yes, a single player with powerful weapons can carry events by themselves if the event is about fighting enemies. But for anything where you collect items, a single player is at a massive disadvantage. Events are just designed and intended for multiple players. Even 2 players makes a huge difference. And ironically, there's a pattern in more players showing up to an event once there's at least 2 players. Yes, people have realized that you need multiple players for events, and I think that they're holding back from joining until there's at least 1 powerful player who can carry the event. But even then, you still have a lot less players at events than I saw when I first started joining them way back when. For people starting the game now, they don't get to regularly see 1,000 players at pretty much every event. Now it's just Eviction Notice and the new Burning Springs events that have a lot of players. And the same goes with daily ops and expeditions. It's rare to see groups fill up, unless there's a daily or weekly challenge to complete them. What is happening right now instead is bounty hunts. On the surface, these are like the boss battles you get after launching a nuke. You have a powerful enemy and everybody on the server can participate. On paper it sounds good. You're providing a challenge to high-level players while also allowing low-level players to take part. But in reality, it usually means that the boss dies immediately because players are just too powerful now. Sometimes the event ends before you properly load in. Now, I'm still using a physical disk instead of an SSD, so I understand that part of the reason for slow loading is that my hardware is slower than other people's. But regardless of loading times, you still have bosses dying pretty much immediately. You're lucky if you can find them before the event ends. I often find myself in the situation where I'm spraying my Tesla cannon around to try and tag enemies that haven't loaded in yet. Basically, bounty hunts end very quickly. For people who are fixated on min-maxing to get the most benefit available in the shortest amount of time, this might seem good. You have an event that pretty much ends as quickly as you fast travel to it, and you get the rewards without doing any work. And because you can trigger the event as often as you want, this means that you can rack up score on the season board and unlock the bonus pages even faster than before. It's all beneficial, right? But for people just starting the game, I can't possibly imagine that they see the current situation as fun. You either have events that have no players, and are likely to fail if you try to do them by yourself, or you have bounty hunts that end immediately. How exactly is that fun? And if a game activity is not fun to do, then why would you care about the game? This is the biggest issue. All the players stick around because they already have an emotional investment in the game, but new players aren't being offered that right now. This is something that I've been stressing for a while now. The process of playing the game must be fun. Despite all the positives that the new zone offers, with all its Easter eggs and environmental touches, the new season has fundamentally broken the progression for new players. Once a new player finishes the quest lines, they find mostly empty events. Maybe some of them will try and do them, but because events are usually designed to be communal, low-level players will struggle to complete them. It will not be as fun as it used to be when I started playing. Doing bounty hunts gives you rewards, but you'd have to struggle to call it fun. So why should a new player stick around? The new player experience is actually worse than it used to be. This is a fundamental question that the latest updates seem to be not addressing. There may be an excessively strong focus on the min-maxers. Unfortunately, I think that we're going to see a repeat of the same pattern as we saw with the first season of the TV series. I have noticed a lot more low-level players since Christmas, so I think we're already seeing the bump from the Amazon series. Some of them will obviously stick around, but unfortunately, I think that the majority will not. At least not in the long term. I'm sorry to have to predict that player counts will drop back to their regular numbers in a month or two. I personally think that the game can offer something unique and interesting, but if I'm being honest, I can't say that new players are being given enough to stick around. I'd love to be proven wrong though, but we'll just have to see how things develop. So let's keep our fingers crossed, eh?